All right, good morning or good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at Biome Makers for our COP28 webinar. Welcome to COP28, Amplifying Soil Health and the Climate Conversation. My name is Joy Joachim. I'm an agroecology scientist, and I'll be moderating today's panel discussion, in which we'll hear from experts on soil biodiversity and hear updates on discussions surrounding soil health from COP28. If you're unfamiliar with COP28, COP28 is the United Nations Climate Change Conference. We just concluded the 28th COP, and it was in the UAE. I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for today's discussion, starting with Dr. Alberto Acedo, the Chief Scientific Officer at Biome Makers, which is a global soil biology company focused on providing actionable data on agronomic metrics. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Jacob Parnell, who is a soil biodiversity specialist at the FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization, and Dr. Lindsay Haram, an ecologist who serves as a climate fellow for the USDA Office of the Chief Scientist. Our agenda today involves 3 sessions, followed by a panel discussion and audience Q&A. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Alberto Acedo for soil health and innovation.
Right, thank you very much, Joy. It's a pleasure to me to be in this webinar with this amazing panelist. An introduction, the concept of the soil health. For most of us, soil health is a characteristics that allow to get functions, to get a specific service, ecosystem service. In this case, for me, applied to the agriculture. When we are talking about soil health, there are different dimensions to take in account. FAO, the USDA are defining very well this concept that involve, for one hand, needs, that is the soil and the different physical and chemical characteristics of the different soils, but turning into an ecosystem when the life appear in that soil. In general, different forms of life are evolving into the soil, and all of them, physical, chemical characteristics, and biology, converge in the concept of soil health to provide that functionality of that ecosystem service for humans. For this key aspect, we can consider that physical chemical parameters together with biology are in the core center of how to measure the soil health globally. But it's interesting also to understand that from more than 100 years, humans are controlling many parameters on the physical chemical, but biology turns like new for us because many of this life is impossible to see in a microscopy or, for example, to grow in a lab. For that, new innovations on genetics, for example, allow us now to understand the diversity that we can find in the soil. Joy, first. Next. In the case of Biome Makers, as a global company, we try to use the specific soil biology as a biomarker. In this case, we are participating in non-profit initiatives that allow us to work in many countries in different projects partnered with the universities in order to understand how this bioindicator, the life in the soil, allow us to measure the soil health in different aspects. Also, we are building a community of people teaching, exchanging our experience in how to use these biomarkers. Next, Joy. Well, what kind of aspects of the soil health is possible to measure with biology? Well, in this case, very easy, detecting pathogens linked with the disease risk. Also, life in the soil is linked with the nutrient cycle, how the life allowed to the plants to get more or less nutrients to grow. Also, bioindicators linked with the stress, with the climate change. If climate change is changing, how that are affecting to specifically plant growth promoters, for example. Monitoring how the practices that we are implementing or promoting to recover soil health aspect are impacting in soil biology. That's another specific aspect. Next, Joy. In our case, we are working in more than 50 countries in many different crops. For sure, the more relevant crops that we are working are row crops like corn or soybean, but other specialty crops like vineyards or tomatoes or potatoes are in our target. We are analyzing thousands and thousands of samples covering amazing surface of land, in our case, in agriculture. Next, Joy. Well, this is a map of the soil health aspect with one of our metrics that's calling the BeCrop rate. BeCrop rate is measuring the level of specialization in the life. In essential, when management practices are super intensive, the practices are specializing the life in the soils. With this kind of metric, we are measuring the average of the specialization in the life in agriculture fields globally. You can see that when the colors are more yellow or green, there's high values. It's like places when more regenerative practices, good practices, smart practices are implementing, and we are receiving samples from that places with higher score compared with other places with a very, very, very low score, because the intensification of the agriculture, or at least the samples that we can right now analyze for that places. And this is a kind of map that allow us to understand how the soil biodiversity linked with the soil health concept is globally. I think that is very interesting because I never see something like similar connected with the management practice, not only to describe the soil biology in the field. Next, Joy. Well, this is how we can explain this kind of metric, the level of specialization of the microbial communities. But this is something that you can read in one of our papers, because we like also to exchange our knowledge. Next, Joy. This is how we are measuring this BeCrop rate. Low levels, D, C, are like conventional agriculture practices. Levels between B and A are more regenerative. A can be very linked with organic agriculture. A plus is like the less intervention management that we can find in agriculture fields. A plus plus, in many cases, are natural environments like jungles. Next, Joy. Well, it's not only about using the soil biology as biomarker. We are mixing also many different metrics to understand the context of the life that we are able to measure in different places. That allows us to understand what kind or what's the relevance of the environmental context to the biological context, how they are impacting. For example, the climate change, how temperature change are affecting to the specialization or not of the microbial communities, the level of pathogens, or, for example, the decrease on plant growth promoters that in general are the species that allow the plant to resist against specific difficult environmental conditions. Next, Joy. But the more interesting thing is we can evaluate, we can diagnostic, we can predict also with AI what can be the future connecting environmental parameters, management practices, and soil biology knowledge. But the key is what we can do to promote this not only in a specific place, if not globally. In our case, we are testing solutions. We are testing, for example, management practices together with universities and also partnership with manufacturer companies of input solutions, for example, understanding the level of efficacy of that solutions, but also understanding the level of impact of that solution in soil biology. The goal is to understand what are the more efficacy mix of solutions that we are able to recommend to specifically different lands, different farmers, with a level of uncertainty in order to get or preserve the soil biology or recover the soil biology in that place and maintain yield and to be very productive too. Next, Joy. Well, in this case, we are also working globally, and we can, for example, to compare one specific solution at efficacy level, or in this case of the nutrient efficacy level, the way to mobilize nutrients by the application of a solution, compared with the average of products that are in the market, and to understand if one specific solution are promoting our efficacy level, the life in the soil in one direction compared with other. Next, Joy. Thanks to that, we are able also to understand if one specific solution are more recommending in specific areas because the specification of the crops, or because the sums that we are able to calculate at an environmental level, and maybe why in other specific places that some solutions are not very effective, or also can affect in a specific way the soil biodiversity.
One more minute.
Perfect. Thanks to that, we not only can work at a status level, at country level, we also can advise specifically farmers. It's like the precision agriculture in the way that each field is different, each farmer is applying different programs of management practices, and in each field we can identify different biomarkers coming from the biology in the soil, and because of that, the specification or the recommendation can be different. Next, Joy, please. Next again. And in this case, we try to be super transparent. We try to exchange this knowledge with public institutions, but also as a private company, we are happy to work together with the industry to achieve our goal. Better soil, better food, and better life.
Excellent, thank you. With that, we'll begin session 2. We have Dr. Jacob Parnell. I will hand it over to you, Jacob, and here we go.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to present here a little bit. So thank you for that. So I'm going to start off by just saying that I am completely biased. I think soils and biology in the soils is the answer to just about every problem we have. And I really believe that soils are just an amazing resource that is obviously not as well understood as it should be for how much comes from it. They're a beautiful resource, and they provide so many services, ecosystem services that we often take for granted. So if you can go ahead to the next slide. So as such, soils tend to be a place where not only we kind of dump everything, but they're also kind of, I believe, a solution to many of the problems that we have. So this is a slide from the Global Soil Partnership at the FAO, and it shows a lot of these big crises that we're facing. Pollution, antimicrobial resistance, fertilizer crisis, biodiversity loss, all of these big things. And I love the fact that they don't really put that it's the problem. So because a lot of these, for example, carbon sequestration, soils have more carbon wrapped up in soils than do all the vegetation or the atmosphere of Earth. And so it's just a known that they can either be an incredible sink for carbon, where we can tie up a lot of carbon from the atmosphere, or if we treat them poorly, they can also become a tremendous source of carbon as that carbon starts to degrade and starts to be put into the atmosphere. The fertilizer crisis, that's another example where the soil biology, there is so much in the soil that is able to provide fertility for the plants that it's kind of like it's just a thing that's there, and the soils can potentially be the answer to a lot of these issues. And these are like the big issues, the big problems, the global problems that we're facing. And so I think it's really cool that, you know, the biggest problems that we're facing are things that we're walking on every day. So just that soil that's right beneath our feet, that's where the answer is. So we'll head to the next slide. So right now, we know that about 1/3 of the soils on the planet are degraded. And that number is expected to go up to about 90% by the year 2050 if we don't do anything, if it's business as usual. And part of the problem is that because we get so many of these great ecosystem services that we take for granted coming from soils, it's hard to imagine what it's going to be like when those ecosystem services start to be hampered, start to disappear or be diminished in any way. Now, typically, when we measure soil degradation, we're either measuring soil chemical processes or the soil physical characteristics of the soil. So when these assessments are done looking at soil degradation, they're looking at erosion, for example, the erodibility of the soils, or nutrient depletion of the soils. So there's very little where they actually look at soil, the biology in the soil, but that's where everything is happening. We know that there was a recent report that came out that said about almost 60% of the species on Earth call soil their home. So they really live in the soils. Soils are alive, and we kind of haven't been treating them as though they're alive. There's a great graphic that I saw that talks about kind of about conventional agriculture. And it really shows that conventional agriculture in the past has been to feed the plant. And we need to move away from that to where we're feeding the soil. And that's what's really going to be able to take care of the plant in the end, instead of just feeding the plant and having the soil at the expense of the soil. So if we can go to the next slide. So one of the things, and this is the reason why I think that a lot of those problems are solved in the biology of soils. So if we think about the evolution of life on Earth, microbes showed up about 3.8 billion years ago. And so microbes have been around for a very long time. So the bacteria in the soil. And then we've got, you know, the fungus or the other microorganisms that start to show up. We've got, you know, fungus that starts to show up. It's not until about 700 million years ago that the plants actually show up. And they show up. So not only are they showing up in a world that is just chock full of microbes, but they actually come from the microbes themselves. So they evolve from this soup of microbes that are there. And so when we try to pull microbes or try to pull the plant out of that evolutionary context and say, we need to grow crops this way, without taking that evolutionary context into account, I think is where we start to make some errors. And I think this slide might be animated and might have some things that come. Okay, so yeah, so for example, we looked at that 80% of plant species are symbiotically linked with microbes. Now this isn't like what Dr. Acedo was talking about, where he talks about just there are benefits that the plants receive from what's going on within the soil from microbes. These are actually where the microbes in the plant are recognizing each other, they're interacting with each other, and they're providing some kind of a benefit. And there are some that are listed here as specific examples. For example, the symbiotic relationship between legumes and nitrogen fixers. We also look at mycorrhizae that kind of form these long networks that go out and really are able to kind of mine nutrients for the plant. So if we look at 80% of the species that are able to do that, and when we do traditional crop breeding, traditional conventional agriculture, we're basically pulling that apart and just trying to take care of the plant all by itself. So let's go ahead to the next. Now, and then of course, this is an interaction that is extremely important, especially in the context of COP28 that just finished, where we look at where does soil organic carbon come from. And it's that about 60%, up to 60% of soil organic carbon. So originally the plants are pushing all of this carbon into the soil as root exudates and as the roots themselves. But really what's happening is the microbes are taking that, they're degrading it, and then they're basically dying, and it's the microbes, necromass and microbial just metabolites and that are making up the bulk of that organic carbon, that soil organic matter that's in the soil, and that's what's going to make the difference. And so it's, you know, if we're going to put carbon into soils, it really starts with the microbes that we have in the soils. Those are the ones that actually get converted into that stable organic pool of soil carbon. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So one of the things that I'm working on here at the Food and Agriculture Organization is to bring people together to say we really need to start doing a better job of incorporating soil biology and biodiversity when we're talking about soils. These soil degradation maps and these numbers that we're getting shouldn't be about chemistry and the soil physical properties without any biological context at all. And so I coordinate an international network on soil biodiversity. These are people that are interested in knowing what's going on with soil biodiversity. So this is a QR code that takes you to the website of how you can join this network. It's free to join. You don't have to have any big credentials. You don't have to have it. It's just saying, I want to know what's going on, and maybe I want to participate and be able to help what's going on. Right now, there are 4 working groups that we have. One is to figure out what is it that we should be measuring. So part of the problem with looking at these soils that have been degraded, that 33% of soils that have been degraded, we know that it's a problem. We know that the biology in the soils provides so many ecosystem services, but we haven't ever really measured that. So we don't know what that degradation has done to those ecosystem services. We don't even know what that degradation that we can see physically and chemically has really done to the biology of the soils, just because that hasn't been measured to the extent that it really needs to be. And so the first group is to really look and say, how do we measure that? What kind of measurements do we collect? And how do we start to monitor what soil biodiversity is and how it changes and how it impacts ecosystem services? And then we've got a second working group within that network. And that second working group is really aimed at, okay, so how do we actually preserve soil biodiversity? It doesn't make any sense to say we should just stop farming altogether, because I would get hungry pretty quickly. So we need to say, how can we still continue to feed the world, but we're also taking care of soil biodiversity? So we're making sure that we're doing it in a smart and sustainable way. The third working group is really looking at what are the economics of soil biodiversity. So I'll jump to the fourth working group first. This is the working group about policy, about how do you put incentives around biodiversity? How do you put laws that protect soil biodiversity, or incentives that promote more sustainable practices? Because that's really what is going to be what's going to make the difference for for politicians is to be able to say, look, this is how much that ecosystem service is going to cost. So if you want clean water, that the soils are basically purifying and cleaning the water, if you want that clean water, without that ecosystem service from the soil, this is how much it's going to cost. So then they're able to say, oh, financially, it benefits us to be able to solve all of these problems with soil biology rather than trying to treat the problem after it's already happened. So those are the 4 working groups. And we just announced last December that we are going to be exploring and I guess really building a global soil biodiversity observatory. So this is where we're going to start monitoring soil biodiversity all over the world. There are 194 different countries that signed on saying that we need to do this and we need to figure out how to do that. So that's one of the goals of this International Network on Soil Biodiversity, is to come up with how we're going to measure it and all of these things that are going into this global soil biodiversity observatory to say this is how we use biodiversity to solve these problems that we're facing. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, I encourage you to follow that link and join the International Network on Soil Biodiversity. And again, it might sound like I'm preaching a little bit, like I'm televangelizing or something, but I really do think that soil biodiversity, the soils, biology of soils, is really where a lot of the answers to our current problems lie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Parnell. That was excellent. Next, we will start session 3. We have Dr. Lindsay Haram, who works in the Office of the Chief Scientist and works for Aim for Climate. So I will pass it over to you, Lindsay, and there you go.
Thanks much, Joy, and thanks for the invitation to be here today. I appreciate it. We can go ahead to the first slide. So as Joy said, I'm the Innovation Sprint lead for the Aim for Climate initiative, or the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate, which is an international initiative co-led by the United States through the U.S. Department of Agriculture and other agencies, along with the United Arab Emirates. And we are essentially a network or collective of partners that seek to address climate change and global hunger simultaneously by uniting participants in a collective network, that with the goal of significantly increasing investment and other support in climate smart agriculture in our agri-food systems over a 5-year period. So the Aim for Climate initiative was launched at COP26 by the UAE and United States. And we have this 5-year period from 2021, when it was launched, to 2025, where we're really trying to drive investment and greater involvement and public-private partnerships in policy and real on-the-ground projects that are taking place. And those real on-the-ground projects or innovation sprints is what I lead and help move forward. In the context of COP28, we're really using COPs as a milestone for our Aim for Climate partnerships. So during each COP, we take a look at the progress to date from the previous year and launch new partnerships and investment announcements as well. So at COP28 this year, we announced that our Aim for Climate initiative, now through the great work of our partners, has an investment of over $17 billion in climate smart agriculture from our government partners and innovation sprint partners. And I'll tell you more about what each type of partner we have in our group in a bit. So there are three main objectives of the Aim for Climate initiative. The first is to really drive investment. So we're, through this group, trying to demonstrate collective commitment to significantly increasing investment in agricultural innovation for climate smart ag and food systems. Why this is important? The agricultural sector globally accounts for 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions. However, we only really see about 4% of climate finance going to the agricultural sector to find solutions for that large chunk of emissions that's happening from our agricultural and agri-food systems. So through the Aim for Climate initiative, we're really trying to get both government and non-government partners to really commit to investing in research and development about climate smart agriculture, as well as scaling the technology that's already in place. So from investment, we're also looking for impact. Dollars are great, but what's actually happening from the money that's invested? So the Aim for Climate initiative creates support frameworks and structures to enable discussions to take place. And we're promoting expertise, knowledge, and priorities across both national and international scales. So the way that we go about really creating collective impact is through engagement, and this can be both formally and informally. For example, on the formal side, we establish structures for exchanges between ministers. We have ministerials that happen every year, at least once, and can also happen in conjunction with other events like COP28, where there was a ministerial event. And this is really a place for government leadership to come together and relay the commitments that they are making and the progress that they've made to date related to climate smart ag. So bringing governments together and allowing there to be a place for joint discourse. We also try to create opportunities for our non-government partners to interact as well. So for example, at COP28, we had 7 total sessions that we created within the blue zone and the green zone. The blue zone is your government partner, high-level partner zone, and then your green zone was open to anyone, essentially. So anyone from the public could be part of the green zone. It's essentially like a conference, a climate conference that you would go to learn about what's going on related to climate change in many different topic areas. So we had 7 different events, all of which showcased our innovation sprint partners in some way, providing them opportunities to really interact and hopefully build collaboration. One that I was particularly excited about was bringing together a group that works on RNA-based pesticide management, specifically in their innovation sprint about honeybee health, with another partner who is using advanced technology to create sensors, a sensor network in beehives that will be open access and help address, essentially provide data, a lot of data on beehive health through sensors. So linking those two up in a conversation for one of our sessions is now hopefully going to lead to them partnering up in their scaling efforts in Africa next year. So that's one example of how we create opportunity for coalescence. Next slide. Thank you. So we have 3 types of participation in the Aim for Climate initiative. As I've alluded to, we have government partners, which are government entities, usually agriculture ministers or ministries, and then also innovation sprints, which can be both non-government and government, so public-private partnerships as well as knowledge partners. For our government partners, we're really looking to sway them toward announcing increases in aggregate funding for climate smart agriculture. So unlike the Paris Agreement, which is a binding agreement, a legally binding agreement, Aim for Climate and many of the initiatives that take place in the COP frameworks or at the COP conferences are informal agreements. They're meant to create relationships, create momentum behind a given cause, in this case, climate smart agriculture. And so with our government partners, we're really trying to bring everyone on board to help, bolster interest and accelerate investment in climate smart agriculture. For our innovation sprint partners, these can be non-government participants. They're teams generally, so you can have a single entity be an innovation sprint partner, or you can have a team of, I think for one of our innovation sprints, that was launched at COP28, they had 23 different non-governmental partners all working together on a specific innovation sprint. And these innovation sprints are an announcement in increased investment for a specific project that's supposed to enable a bold idea related to climate smart agriculture. They're usually research and development projects. They can be scaling projects as well. They can be a mix of the two. But the big thing is that they take place on the Aim for Climate timeline. So from 2021 to 2025. So really trying to get momentum moving quickly for research and development about climate smart agriculture and scaling of the technologies that are developed. Then we have our knowledge partners as well, which Biome Makers is a knowledge partner of the Aim for Climate initiative. These are non-government participants that are really interested in doing excellent work related to climate smart agriculture, who want to be part of the Aim for Climate initiative and help amplify the work that's being done by partners within our networks. So it's a very open initiative. We have a lot of opportunity for engagement. Last year, or it's not 2024 yet, but it's almost 2024. In May 2023, we had the Aim for Climate Summit here in Washington, DC, that brought together a bunch of our partners to talk about the progress to date, which was excellent, and we plan to hopefully do another one of those in the future. We also always have people on the ground at the COP conferences as well to help move forward work in this area. So if you're interested in learning more about Aim for Climate, please visit our website at aimforclimate.org. You can also reach out to me as well at lindsay.heron@usda.gov for more information about the Aim for Climate initiative. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the COP28 outcomes, or still sort of they're in draft at this point. So we saw some excellent work from our partners, our UAE partners, to get a declaration out for sustainable agriculture that has a good number of signatories, over 150, I believe. So really seeing commitment to bringing agriculture into the fold of climate solutions. But the larger global stocktake effort, which is the first time that the COP parties are taking a look at progress to date and charting a plan forward, is still in draft and hasn't yet been finalized. So there's still more to come in the COP28 arena in terms of progress to date on that. But yeah, if anyone is interested in learning more about COP28 and how Aim for Climate was involved, please visit our website and learn more. I think that's it.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Heron, that was great. And now we are on to our panel discussion. So there are some questions we have here. The first two are for Dr. Alberto Ocedo. What's your ideal goal for increasing biodiversity?
Well, first of all, we need to understand what means biodiversity. Biodiversity is a very complex concept that can involve number of species or complexity of a community of life in terms of percentage or abundance of species together, beta, alpha diversity, and scientific metrics to follow. When we are talking about biodiversity, we are talking about a kind of bioindicator based in ecology that is influenced by management practices. The ideal goal to increasing biodiversity is to promote the life in the soil, the functionality in the soil, but at the same time, doing that allow to maintain yields and productivity and quality of the food, getting a balance between nature and human needs. That's for me the ideal goal when we are talking about to increase biodiversity, because we cannot consider agriculture like the nature. It's different, but getting a balance when biodiversity can be involved in the economics of the agriculture is the ideal goal for me to achieve.
Excellent. Okay, and then the next question also here, what benefits will we see regarding climate change from increased biodiversity?
Well, we have data that in many places, increasing biodiversity involve more functionality, and especially for a group of microbes that are calling plant growth promoters. Reviewing all the literature that we know, the scientific knowledge that we know, there is this specific species, the plant growth promoters, allow the plant to grow under difficult conditions. For example, under high level of salinity and the high level of drought. And we have experimental data, for example, adding biodiversity promoters like biostimulants, that when in the field was decreasing fertigation, included with that level of stress, we observe a high increase on yield and also the size of the production. This is a very nice example that if we understand biology and how to play with the biology, we can fight against climate change, promoting this piece of the biodiversity that allow to the plant to grow better.
Excellent, thank you. All right, and our next question, Jay, for Dr. Parnell, where are we at today with soil biodiversity progress? Where do you think we currently stand?
So I think that there is a lot of motivation out there to start looking at soil biodiversity. It was mentioned, as I said in the last COP, Aim for Climate has had big summits. There are a lot of people that are talking about biodiversity. The problem is there aren't a lot of people saying this is how you measure it. I think like Dr. Acedo said, that it's a fairly complex thing to understand. You know, the great thing about things like you know, if you look at soil chemical or physical properties, you can go and you can measure pH, and you can have a nice map of what pH looks like across the field, across the state, country, globally. The question is, how do you do that with biodiversity, and have it be something that's meaningful? I mean, you could do that with a component of, you could do that with alpha proteobacteria, or you could do that with earthworms, or you could do something like that. But those are just components of this bigger picture of biodiversity. And so I think one thing that we need to do is we need to come together and we need to say, what are those bioindicators that are most important for soil biodiversity, so that we can come up with just a couple of things that we can say, these are the important things, and now we can map them, we can show them to policymakers or farmers or whoever it is, to say, this is what your practice is doing to biodiversity. And then they would understand that a lot better than if we tried to show them a big table of all of the bacteria or fungal strains that are missing or that are present in different soils.
Okay, thank you. And then following up from your mentioning about ecosystem services, what does it look like to align soil biodiversity with some sort of monetary amount?
You know, I wish I knew, but I think it is going to come down to realizing that sustainability can be profitable, and so it takes a little while to get there, to kind of wean ourselves away from conventional agriculture, for example, to get into a place where, you know, you're practicing good no-till agriculture, and you've got a healthy ecosystem. The ecosystem has kind of bounced back and has kind of become restored, and it can become a productive system. But first of all, that takes a little while, and you lose some agricultural productivity during that time. But then when you do get to that point, the resiliency of your fields is much better. It's a lot better water holding capacity in those fields that you don't. So a drought comes and your fields are going to do a lot better than if you hadn't done it. And so I think it takes kind of a long time look at these things to be able to say, you know, this is really what it's, you know how much it's going to save us monetarily. And to be honest, I think it's a cheap fix. The amount of the investment that it takes to put into, I mean, Dr. Haram mentioned how much is put into changing into more regenerative agriculture. Really a cheap fix for the problems that we're looking at compared to some of the options that are out there.
All right, thank you very much. Our next question is for Dr. Haram. What are ways stakeholders can get involved with the innovation sprints at Aim for Climate?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I'm biased in my position in that I am the innovation sprint lead. So I really encourage folks who are working on essentially research projects or development projects at home or abroad related to moving to regenerative agriculture, for example, related to investigating those metrics that Dr. Parnell talked about, those types of projects can easily translate to innovation sprints within the Aim for Climate network. So for example, we have both more academically based research as innovation sprints versus one that was announced at COP28, which was a $500 million investment in regenerative landscapes. So moving supply chains to regenerative agriculture for some major heavy hitting companies, global companies. So, we go from $150,000 investment. So we're talking about a pilot study scale investment in food waste and loss versus $500 million investment. There's really a huge broad spectrum of ways you can get involved as an innovation sprint. And really, we have about it's about a dozen of our 78 innovation sprints are focused on soil health in some way. A lot of it is related to regenerative agriculture, so how to scale regenerative agriculture, but also getting into the mechanics of carbon sequestration and the impacts of some of our enhancements that people are looking into for carbon sequestration on soil health. That's another avenue that I think is really apt for more research and would love to see folks working on that get involved as innovation sprints. So visit the Aim for Climate website. There's a innovation sprint partner framework on our website that details what it means to become an innovation sprint partner, what an innovation sprint looks like, and how you propose an innovation sprint. And as I said before, I'm also here to answer questions one-on-one. I meet with a lot of folks in one-on-one conversations to discuss whether or not the projects they're working on would be good for innovation sprints. And most of the time they are. So please feel free to reach out to me, and I can put my email in the chat maybe as well, so folks can reach out to me directly. I'll look into that. Maybe I can't. But
we do have we are getting a lot of questions in as well, so I think
okay, great.
Our last ones that I have for you, and then I'll start asking these others that are coming in for both you and Jacob. So the last question for you, Lindsay, can you tell us more about how agriculture can provide answers for climate change challenges and what's on the horizon for Aim for Climate? What's coming next?
Yeah, so like I said at the top of my presentation, agriculture accounts for 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and much of that is within the actual land use and production. So we know that we have technologies in place, we have practices in place that we know are climate smart. So really, a lot of times it's a matter of moving people to those practices like we try to do with translation to regenerative agriculture. Like everyone on this call is talking about, soil health is a really, really important piece of the puzzle. We know that enhancing soil health can minimize nitrous oxide emissions, which is a huge part of our agricultural greenhouse gas emissions. So very many ways for agriculture to step up and be part of the solution. It's really a matter of folks making the transition in some ways to more climate smart practices. So what's on the horizon for Aim for Climate? We are going to continue until 2025. There will be more calls for innovation sprint proposals along the way. So later this year, next year, there will be a call for proposals in the spring. So please, if you're interested, join Aim for Climate, and you'll get announcements about those calls.
Excellent. All right, question for both of you. What do you see as our greatest barriers towards meeting the UN climate resolutions for 2024 or by 2050?
I could start. I think there are a lot of barriers, but I think that there are a lot of solutions as well. So part of, I think, where we have started moving, where we've seen the parties moving for the Convention of Parties, these COPs, is realizing the importance of non-government actors as well. So I think the more that governments and our non-government actors start to collaborate and push each other towards solutions, the faster we'll see a resolution. And we're still in a space where that's kind of iffy at times. But this COP, from what I've heard from folks who attended, it was really clear that you know, both sides see that collaboration is essential for moving forward.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dr. Haram. I think that the biggest barrier right now is that there is not enough, and to be honest, I think some of the failures of the previous treaties that the UN had put forward as far as things moving is that there wasn't enough communication. So policymakers are saying one thing, that this is what we should do, and academia is saying, well, this is the smart stuff to do, and that's not really what policymakers are doing. And farmers are out in their field saying, how in the world do you expect me to implement this that doesn't make any sense in my field? And so there's just a lot of confusion in the past. And I'm hoping that we've learned from that, from those mistakes, and that moving forward, I was at a mission soil program a couple of weeks ago, and it was the first big conference like that where they actually had farmers there. And so we need to have farmers in those meetings with policymakers, with scientists, and we need to get the scientists out into the field so the farmer can say, well, look, this is why it's not going to work in my field, because look right over there, and then farmers or scientists will be able to say, oh, I get it now. So it's just kind of that lack of communication that sometimes we're just missing.
All right, last question that we have for everyone: the status of implementing the new soil health resolution. What do we know about that from this most recent COP?
Well, there was a declaration on sustainable agriculture, resilient food systems, and climate action that was put forth by the UAE and signed by 158 government signatories. And then there was an associated non-government party call to action that was also signed by over 200 non-party supporters. So that was a major declaration, essentially, that both government and non-government actors understand that sustainable agriculture is essential for success moving forward, and soil health is absolutely part of that declaration. So I think we're moving forward in a positive way. We've gone from COPs where agriculture was barely present to now COPs where we have a major declaration and over 158 government signatories and non-government actors ready to go. So I think it's exciting.
Yeah, and I think that the tenor of this COP was much different, because in previous, it was agriculture is the problem. And now this one, it's more like agriculture is the solution. And so it's a very different mindset. It's not so much, farmers are causing all of our problems in the world. It's more like, hey, farmers are kind of the best way to reach a solution, which I think has been tremendous. And I think this, it's a great step forward.
Amazing. Okay, well, we are at time, but if you're both willing to hang around for a few minutes, we do have some questions from the audience. All right, so here we are. Thank you, audience, for these great questions. Let me see. Does Aim for Climate have an available budget to support innovative projects between partners, Lindsay?
We don't, which is a total bummer, but so the short answer is no. However, I will say that one of my goals as the innovation sprint lead is to essentially build like a mini network, essentially, of potential funders who could support innovation sprints, in creating opportunities for innovation sprint partners to present the work that we're doing. That's always the hope, that they're going to make the connections that they need to find more funding and advance, or even just partnerships to advance the work that they're trying to do. So short answer is no, but I'm working on creating a framework to help get around the US government not being able to hand out money for Aim for Climate.
Okay, question for both of you. How do countries in the developing world like Nigeria get access to training and tools and equipment for soil evaluation and analysis, including solutions to soil degradation?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The Food and Agriculture Organization has a group called Soil Doctors, and so these are basically people that go out and they train on regenerative or conservation, sustainable soil management practices, and so they're going all over the world and doing these things to help farmers come together to see, basically a workshop to see how to implement these kind of practices, and it's been very successful so far. I'm not sure when there will be one of these in some of these developing countries, but they're happening quite regularly, and if you contact me, I will let you know kind of where they're showing up next.
All right, excellent. Next question. Are there any initiatives taking into account soil biodiversity outside of the bacterial and fungal bubble? I feel like we always stop the conversation at bacteria and fungi. However, we know the other micro and macrobiota in soil are also integral to ecosystem health and function.
So yes, there was a paper published just a couple of years ago that kind of did an overview of kind of the essential biological variables that should be considered when looking at soil ecosystems. And they did have kind of that micro and macro fauna included in that. So as we develop this global soil biodiversity observatory, we are going to include beyond just bacteria and fungal communities. We're going to be looking at, some of the microinvertebrates and things like that.
Okay, and last question here. Which farming practices are the most destructive to soil health? And sub question, what's an easy change, or what's the easiest to change with the greatest impact? What can farmers do right away?
So my opinion is, well, so can I limit it to 3?
Sure.
So the first is disrupt the soil as little as possible. So that means no-till, if possible, no-till. So there was at this conference, there was a farmer there that was saying, minimal till is still till. So if you can completely get rid of tilling, I know that that's a tough thing to do. The other one is just minimize as much as possible synthetic fertilizers. So try to go as much organic, as much and just the bare amount that you need. So kind of minimize those external inputs. And then the last one is to minimize kind of the kind of monoculture. So, you know, have row crops, have things that are, so that you've got more than one crop or more than one plant at least in the soil. Those are my top three.
The question was not for me, but I would add cover crop and intercrop as much as possible. Keeping our soils covered, we know is really helpful in mitigating rainfall events and soil erosion. Dr. Haram, did you want to add anything before we?
Yeah, I was going to say that as well. That at the USDA, I mean, we're majorly pushing for reducing tillage and cover cropping as important first steps for our farmers to take for soil health and for carbon sequestration purposes as well. So yeah, just amplifying that as well.
Amazing, excellent. Well, we are over time. Thank you both for staying. There are some other questions in the chat that I'll make sure you get, and those people get those questions answered. For anyone who wants to learn more, we have the contact information for all three of us and Dr. Acedo as well available for you. And thank you so much for joining our webinar. Hope you all have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.